All right. I want to welcome you to this evening's webinar. This is the Waypoint 55 webinar series. My name is Tim Cole, and I am the Executive Director. Let me get out of this right here. Stop share. I am the Executive Director of Waypoint Church Partners, and we are really glad to have you with us here this evening. Waypoint exists to really navigate ministry together with churches and leaders, come alongside leaders and churches and help them to get on mission and stay on mission. And so one of the ways we do that is through this monthly webinar series that's sponsored by our regional ministry partner, Mid-Atlantic Christian University. And so we're really thankful that they help us with by sponsoring this webinar series. And tonight our speaker, actually an alumnus of MacU, and he is one of the church planters that we have here in the region at Life Point Church outside of Williamsburg, and also the fire chief at his local fire department. And so we are going to be dealing with this topic about safety in the church, particularly fire threats in your church. So I'm really glad to have my friend and colleague, Phil, with us tonight. I can't tell you, this is a little awkward to be honest, because I can't tell you in my 30 years of ministry how many times I've been in the church and something was a little wonky and we say, well, that's just fine so long as the fire marshal never shows up. And so Phil, as a preacher, probably has never had that happen at his church because he's the fire chief. And so so his church doesn't get the luxury of trying to look the other way for those things that are just a little bit not right. So we're going to talk about those things tonight, particularly protecting your church, both the property and the people. And what that looks like. But I do want to tell you a few things about our interface. First of all, at the bottom of your screen there, you're going to see a button that says Q&A, and there's no surprise, that's the question and answer function. And if you've not been part of one of our webinars before, we want to invite you, as soon as you think of a question, to go ahead and click that button, ask your question via typing, and it'll go in a queue for us where we can address those at the end of the webinar if we have time. And if we run out of time or have too many questions, we're also able we are also able to answer those emails after the fact via email. And so so if you have a question, don't wait till the end. Go ahead and type it in as soon as you think of it, and we'll have that to be able to answer as time allows. You'll also be receiving a follow-up email tomorrow evening, 24 hours after this webinar. There's an automatic email generated by our interface that will, I'm getting pinged by somebody. Sorry about that. Modern technology. So you'll get an email, and tomorrow part of that email is we will have links to several things that you'll want to know about. Some of them will be the links to register for our upcoming webinars that we'll talk about at the end, but also there'll be a link to the PDF of the slides that we're going to use tonight, as well as a PDF to the 2-page outline that Phil has for tonight's webinar. So it'll kind of serve for you as a checklist, really, to go through and look at your facility with respect to what he's talked about tonight. And so there will be links to both of those PDFs, as well as a few things added to that in the email that you'll get tomorrow. So we're glad that you're here. Phil, one thing I do want to do is there's going to be a couple polls midway through. And so I'm going to launch a poll right now just to get you acclimated to using the poll, but also to kind of take attendance, because there will be more people on tonight's webinar than just the number of computers that are there are more than one person per computer often. And so if you would just chime in and say how many people are on your computer this evening watching our security webinar, that'd be great. All right. There we go. All right. So just ones and twos tonight. All right. End that right there. So we are glad that you're joining us. We're going to drive some other polls later on. But Phil, I want to go ahead and give you give you permission to just start rolling right into the topic, introduce yourself to us, and then roll right into this great outline that you got for us.
Sure. Hey everybody, my name is Phillip Murdock. Maybe some of you have seen the promo video for tonight. I'm going to assume most of you have, but if you haven't, I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I am the lead minister at Life Point Christian Church, which is located in Toano, Virginia. Most people don't know where Toano is. It's just to the west of Williamsburg, Virginia. And been here on staff since we launched back in 2006. Been in ministry since 1994, 25 years. And so I've had an opportunity to serve in churches where we had a fixed building, but also have had the opportunity to serve in churches where we were mobile. In fact, we've been mobile for the last 13 years. And that will play in a little bit into tonight, what we're going to talk about, because it really doesn't matter whether or not you have your own building or you're mobile. There's still some things you need to be aware of and ways that you can protect your people. In addition to ministry, I've also sort of had this other lane in my life that I've traveled in, which is the fire service. First got into fire service 20 years ago in 1999. I worked for the city of Martinsville. I've worked with state and federal government agencies. And in the area that we live in here in Toano, we have a very large volunteer fire department that actually covers over half the county. And I'm the fire chief for that department. So it's a lot of fun. I love ministry and I love the fire service, and being and traveling in both of those sort of worlds, it's afforded me the opportunity to maybe see things in our churches through a different set of lenses than a lot of people get to view things. And so I wanted to share a few of those with you tonight. And they're gonna be really easy because everything is gonna start with I. As Tim said, you're gonna get this PDF. It's gonna give you all these bullet points. But I wanna talk to you about things that you can do to help protect your property, but also protect lives that come on your property. So let me jump right to it and tell you what the first one is here. And the first I is invite. Invite your local fire department to come and to visit your campus. I cannot stress this enough. Now, you may think, and some people are reluctant to invite the local fire department into their building because they're scared that, as Tim said, the fire marshal is going to come in. And I used to do some of that inspecting stuff. And but here's what I'll tell you. Most departments, I'll even go as far as saying good departments, when they are invited in, they don't look at it as an opportunity to write people tickets and things like that. They really look as an opportunity to help. And so if you will, I'm sure there's a contact number for the fire department or public safety in the county or the city that you live in, and just say, hey, you know what, I'm so-and-so from this church, and setting this webinar, and there was this guy talking about inviting the local fire department to come in and visit. A lot of what we do as firefighters and fire departments is we want to get ahead of the game. We don't want to show up to say, let's just say worst case scenario, your church building is on fire. When we arrive, we don't want that to be the first time we step foot on your campus or the first time we've ever been into your building. We really would have liked to have visited there before and actually developed something we call a pre-plan. And it's exactly what it sounds like. It's a plan that we put together before an incident that helps to prepare us for anything that might potentially happen. And so what that does is we get to come out and we get to visit. We'll walk around. We're going to see where corridors and entrances and exits are. But we're also going to be noting several other things that and where those things are located at. You're going to see on your screen here in a minute what a pre-plan actually looks like. Now, we keep these pre-plans in a few different locations. You may see sometimes fire engines or command vehicles driving around with what looks like a laptop or a tablet inside that vehicle. That is a way we can access pre-plans that we've already developed in advance for industries and businesses and schools and yes, even churches that we go. And on that pre-plan, it tells us all sorts of things when we arrive. It shows us, for one, the floor plan. What does your building look like inside? And so, you know, where are the exits? Where are the corridors? Where's your children's stuff? And so actually, if you go over there Tim, to the next slide, I believe it is. Okay, this is a pre-plan that you're looking at in front of you right now. And what that looks like is it shows you obviously the floor plan that is there, but there's also some very critical things we like to know when we show up. I'm not sure if hopefully you can see my cursor right here. But if you notice, there's an A, B, C, and D side. In the fire department, when we arrive at a building or any structure, we assign the front of the building as the A side. And then we go around clockwise from that building, and the left side is going to be B, the rear of the building will be C and D. That just helps us navigate and everyone to be on the same page. But What this does is it helps us know things like, does your building have a fire department connection, what we call FDC? If you have sprinkler systems, and some of the church buildings do, or maybe you meet in a movie theater, or you meet in a public school, or you meet at a local community building, chances are if it's newer, it's going to have an FDC. That allows us to boost pressures to the sprinkler system that's inside. We like to know where that's at. If we have a pre-plan, we know immediately where it's at. It looks like this. Otherwise, we're walking around your building at 2 o'clock in the morning trying to figure out where that FDC is. We're going to want to know where things like, where's your electrical cutoff? Where is your water cutoff? Where is your gas cutoff? Where are those things located? Where are propane tanks located? And this pre-plan, as you can see up here in this area right here, the WG&E tells us that all these things are located at the rear of the building. If there's an alarm panel, it tells us where that alarm panel is and perhaps even what the codes are there, a contact person, where the exits are. These are things that take time to figure out if you've never been to those buildings before. So inviting your fire department, your local fire department, a chance to come out is going to allow them to create a pre-plan. There are things like, do you have fire hydrants? Maybe you live in an area that does not have fire hydrants. Maybe that means they're gonna have to bring some sort of water shuttling service in, a tanker, things of that nature. If they're gonna put a ladder up, if there's low hanging electrical lines, it allows them to put all of that in place. So I just wanna begin by encouraging you to reach out to your local fire department and giving them the invitation to come in and visit your facility wherever that might be. Now, if you rent a facility like we do, you're probably going to have to ask the owner of that facility for permission to do that, and hopefully they'll be open to that. One of the things I want to point out, right, and we're going to talk a little bit more about later, is this K that's down here on this pre-plan. That is called a Knox box. Really, really important if you have a church building. And you should have a Knox box, and we're going to talk about what that is in just a little bit. So again, these pre-plans stay on our computers in our vehicles, or they stay in a notebook inside the first arriving engine. And I cannot tell you how valuable this is to an incident. And this goes beyond just fire. Let's say you have a heart attack in the middle of a service. The most likely emergency situation in your church buildings is going to be a medical emergency. Knowing the layout of your church building is going to help responders to get in there and get out quicker. So again, just invite them in. We love getting invitations to visit people's facilities and sort of wrap our heads around, because we'll actually go meet later and talk about it. Like, hey, how would you tackle this? And what should the pre-plan look like? So set it, do it, invite your local fire department. But the next thing I want to encourage you to do is to inspect. I want you to inspect things in your building. Now, in just about any town you go into, any city or any county, if I went into your town or your city right now and I asked you the question, take me to the 3 oldest buildings in your city, town, community, I would be willing to bet that at least one, probably 2 of those 3 buildings that you're going to take me to are going to be church buildings, right? There may be some historic buildings. Maybe some of you meet in buildings. I know some of our churches do. They meet in very historic buildings. And so whether you're older or newer building or construction, you really need to take some time, at least once a year, to walk through and inspect things on your campus. And so let me share a few of those things with you that would be really good for you to inspect on your campus. The first one is, actually, before we do that, I'm going to ask, we'll do a poll here, Tim. Where do you think are the most likely, what is the most likely location for you to have a fire to start at in your building? Where do you think those are? And so, do you think it's in the kitchen? Do you think it's electrical? Do you think it's heating? Or do you think it's arson? And you guys can go ahead and, where do you think is the most common location for a fire to start in a church building? So I'll give you guys a little bit of time. And Tim, you just let me know when everyone's kind of chimed in there.
Yep, they're responding right now.
Good.
All right, we are pretty much evenly split between kitchen and electrical.
All right. Well, the most likely location actually is going to be kitchen. Kitchen is the most likely location. The second location is actually your heating equipment. So in a furnace room or something like that is the second location. But first is kitchen. Now, here's the next question to go along that follows that up. Can you guess which is the most expensive or the most costliest kind of fire you can have in a church? And that would be arson, heating, equipment, electrical, or kitchen. So the government actually compiles all this data. I'm looking at the 2018 NFPA report on U.S. religious and funeral property structure fires, fact sheets for the United States. So what is the costliest kind of fire?
Wait, can you say that fact sheet again? Say that title again.
All right. Oh, the NFPA. This is actually going to be a link. I'm going to send you this link in the PDF I sent you. It's the NFPA U.S. Religious and Funeral Property Structure Fires fact sheet. And it talks about, I don't know why, but they lump funeral properties, I guess because crematoriums and things of that nature in this sheet as well. But from 2007 to 2011, what was the costliest? What cost the most amount of money? What kind of fire at a church building cost the most amount of money? So Tim, again, you just let me know.
Yeah, we've got 2/3 have voted, and they're thinking electrical is the most, and then heating is second. I would guess arson, you lose your whole building, but I'm not able to answer.
Yes, actually, the costliest is arson, followed again by heating equipment. Cooking equipment, your kitchen is only 4%. Those are typically put out pretty fast. Furnaces and intentional are very close in the amount, but actually arson is the costliest fire you have. We're going to talk about that in a little bit, about some things you can do to protect your property when it comes to arson and how that works. So that's some information for you as you think through this. But let's talk a little bit about kitchens. Kitchens being the most likely place for you to have a fire originate in your building there. And the kitchen is obviously, you're going to have microwaves and stoves and things of that nature in that. And so you're going to want to go through and inspect those things. I have been in some church buildings with pretty back a long way. Whether it's gas or electric, they look to be 30, 40, 50 years old. They're very big, they're very heavy. The question is, when's the last time they've been inspected? When's the last time the gas lines have been inspected? When's the last time that electrical cord that's probably run off a 220 has been inspected? So inspect those things. All the appliances that are in there, your gas connections that are in there. If you have a hood system, a suppression system in your kitchen, you should have those inspected at least once a year. NFPA suggests that at least once a year you have like your suppression system inspected. If you have a hood suppression system over, let's say you got fryers in your church because your church does a fish fry, you're going to want to get that taken care of once a year, just like a smoke alarm or something of that nature. So check this out. On a side note, not only talking about fires is also check on things when you talk about risk and security and liability, where things like your knives are located at. Are they in a place where kids can come in and just snatch them out and perhaps hurt themselves? And so just think about things like that in your kitchen as far as the risks that might be there in there. The other place I want to tell you to check and look at is your storage spaces. Again, being in ministry, I have visited some churches who have had some pretty scary storage spaces. Perhaps you have a prop room or you have a costume room, and you have things like that just kind of get stored in there and it just gets filled up. And that sort of clutter and amassing of stuff in a small place is really a dangerous thing. It's a place where a fire could start very easily and grow very fast. So some of you probably right now are thinking of places in your church buildings, whether it be behind the stage or maybe downstairs, a closet or something like that, that's got way too much stuff in it and it's not safe. You need to inspect those spaces and you need to clean them out. It's a risk. It presents a risk to you and your people and your property. So check that out. The next thing on here I want to encourage you to check after you've done kitchen and appliances and your storage spaces is check out the wiring in your building. Again, maybe you have brand new construction. Maybe you're meeting in a building that's not your own, so this might be a little bit harder. But my guess is you know, a lot of our churches are in older buildings, or at least part of the building is older, and the wiring can be old, and it can break down the insulation around it. It can break down with time, and I would really encourage you to have that inspected by a professional to make sure that you don't have a risk there. After you're done checking your wiring, check your exits. Do your exits work? I am amazed at the number of places I go and they have exits that are locked, that have no business being locked, that don't work, and doors that haven't worked in forever, and so they just lock it and leave it. You can't do that. And again, bringing in a fire department is going to help you with that, and maybe that's the reluctance. Sometimes it's there, but you really want to have your doors to make sure that they're properly functioning so that people can get out. You want to talk about a liability, let something happen and the door's not functioning, people not be able to get out or exit your building quickly because the doors weren't properly functioning, that the exit lights above the doorways weren't properly lit. Those are things, I mentioned this in my promo video. I think sometimes in churches we become very complacent because we go, well, nothing's ever happened in the past, or we think, well, that's someone else's job, that's mine. What I want you to know is, if you're watching this, if you are staff, if you are on a leadership team, if you're a ministry team leader, if you have whatever title it is your responsibility as much as it is anyone else. You need to make sure that things like the exits are working and that they're well marked and well lit. Hydrants, make sure your hydrants are not covered by something. They're not, I went to a fire recently and it was a brand new subdivision. We went on a fire and they had put these nice fences in front of the property, and they literally put a fence about 12 inches in front of a fire hydrant, making that fire hydrant, we would have to kick over the fence to be able to use that fire hydrant. And it was a brand new build. It was less than 6 months old. So make sure that your fire hydrants, again, imagine 2 o'clock in the morning, there's a fire. If you have fire hydrants, are they well marked? Have you had them tested? I mean, and you can ask the fire department to come out and test those as well, make sure they're functioning. Are there a bunch of bushes or hedges that have come around them? When you have snow during the wintertime of your building, does whoever plows your driveway at your church cover the hydrant in snow so it's inaccessible if there was something going on? So hydrants are really important to make sure that they're highly visible and that they're easily accessible. Your sprinkler system, inspect it. You have to have it inspected, by the way, once a year, but you need to bring in a professional. Not just some guy who's been doing it for 10, 20 years and knows the system. You need to bring in a certified professional who can do that. If you don't know who that is in your community, you can find that stuff online, or you can, again, ask your local fire department and they'll be able to point you in the right direction to have your sprinkler systems. Lightning rods. Not many buildings today have lightning rods, but again, if you're going to find them, chances are it's going to be an old building. And we just said that most of our old buildings, or a lot of our older buildings in our communities, are church buildings. So you have the lightning rod. You should get that inspected once a year, and you really should inspect it after every big storm and every big lightning storm, something like that. And then smoke detectors and pool stations. Again, once a year, you need to get those checked. And I'm saying that, and that's all common sense, but I cannot tell you the number of times, because this is the sort of thing I think about because of the worlds I've lived in, of going into a church building, and I'll just walk by a fire extinguisher and I'll just notice the tag on there. And it's 3 years since anyone has inspected that fire extinguisher. Those things go bad, and you don't want them to go out of date, and then suddenly you're trying to use it and it doesn't work, and now you're losing property, or you're losing lives, or someone's getting hurt because of that. And it happens all the time in buildings in general, but in churches, again, we can become incredibly complacent. So inspect those places. Again, you're going to just list, inspect your kitchens, your storage spaces, the wiring in your buildings, your exits, do they work? Are they well lit? Your sprinkler systems, your hydrants, your lightning rods, and your smoke detectors and pull stations. So be sure that you inspect those things. And those things, they're not going to cost you any money for the most part to do those things. Some of the stuff, getting the hoods and your sprinkler system might cost you a little bit of money, but it's so well worth it. The next thing is, so we have invite your.
Let me interrupt you, Phil. I just want to remind our folks, if you have any questions, to go ahead and hit their Q&A button to where they can ask you questions about any of those things that you just referred to, and maybe with respect to their particular property. So if you got questions, go ahead and hit those and we'll see them. Second of all, just remind them with the lightning rods. I don't remember the details. I'm guessing you would, but there's a pretty prominent church in Virginia 20 years ago, North Side, that was struck by lightning and burned to the ground. And it was a pretty large church. And so, but I don't know the lightning rod situation. I'm curious if you know about that, but we just think, oh, that never happens. And
oh, it happens. Yeah, especially if you have a steeple. I actually sat in the parking lot and watched Northside burn to the ground when that happened. I was in bed and I was watching the news, and they were like, "This just in," and then they were showing pictures of it. So we got in the car and drove down there. But that situation, if I'm not mistaken, they did not have lightning rods, and it hit the steeple, and that's where it started. But if you have a high building, especially if your church is on a hill, which a lot of churches are, if you're out in the country and you're kind of the highest point, you're going to want, and lightning rods can be expensive. I get it, but they can protect. So yeah, if you have steeples and stuff like that, you really want to look into that. And then if you have them, you want to inspect them. Absolutely. My guess is a lot of folks who have lightning rods that haven't been looked at in a decade or two as far as inspection. So invite the local fire department in so they can develop a pre-plan. It's going to help save lives. It's going to help save property. Inspect these locations that are, we talked about in that survey, that are high probability locations for fires: your furnace room, your electrical, your kitchen. And then the last thing, next to the last thing is install. Install. Go spend a little bit of money and install. And here's 4 quick things that I would encourage you to install. The first thing is extinguishers. Make sure you have enough extinguishers and the right kind of extinguishers in your buildings. Again, if you're just going to Lowe's and you're just buying the ABC fire extinguisher and you're bringing that in there and you're putting that in the kitchen or you're putting that in the electrical room, you're not going to have the right kind of extinguishers. And without doing a big talk and instructional video on extinguishers, there's lots of information you can find online about what is the right extinguishers. There are extinguisher companies that you can find locally. You can go to your local fire department and they'll be happy to, again, when they're visiting, ask them, hey, do we have the right extinguishers? What sort of extinguisher would you recommend for outside of our electrical room or for grease fires in our kitchen? But spend the money on extinguishers. I can't tell you how many fires that we have gone on over the last 20 years, or I've been on, where it's just a simple $20 fire extinguisher could damage. Or say someone from getting hurt, just to put the fire out when it's small. And then of course, if you have fire extinguishers, you need to train your people on how to use them. Your children's ministry people, your AD people, do they even know how to use them? The next thing is a Knox box. Now this might be new to you, this whole terminology Knox box, but I really would encourage all of you that have church buildings to have a Knox box installed to your building. You can contact your local fire department, I keep saying that, to help you with that process. But let me explain to you what a Knox box is. It is a secure, almost like a safe that is built into your building. It's usually about, I'd say, this size. There's some that are a little bit bigger, but let's say 6 by 6. It's installed into the front exterior of your building on most times, so like into the brick or wherever. It's secure, and what you're going to do is you're going to put a set of keys or a contact number or the code in there, and then what happens is each locality has their own Knox box code. So don't just go buy a Knox box. You have to buy a Knox box that's coded to your community. All right. So like in our community, our engines have one Knox box key, and that opens the keys in our community. The Knox boxes in our community. Very helpful, because imagine a situation, let's say an ice storm. It's 10 degrees outside, it's an ice storm. We get an alarm for First Christian Church on Main Street. We roll up at 2 a.m. We can't get inside. We don't know what's going on, but we want to make sure there's not a fire inside. So now we're calling dispatch and we're saying, do you have the phone number of a key holder? Now they're calling somebody in the middle of the night during an ice storm to get out there and do a Knox box. We can walk right up, open it up. It has contact information. It has keys. It has a floor plan printout. It has the critical information that we need to know, and you can install it right there at the front of your building. So install a Knox box. It will save you a lot of aggravation, but it also could potentially save your property. Or a good portion of your property by us having access there. The next thing, install fire evacuation plans and maps. There's one that's going to come up here on your screen. These should be posted throughout your building. You have guests that come into your building that may not know how to get out if something happens. Your children's ministry workers, do they know how to get out? We're going to talk more about incident action plans here in a moment. But fire evacuation, you should install those in the building, telling people how to get out. And then the last thing, And maybe we're spending some money to install some security and monitoring on your building. Yes, it costs money, but I told you the costliest fire for churches is arson. So sometimes having that early detection, whether it's security cameras around your perimeter of your campus or 24-hour monitoring that's going to pick up the smoke or the heat in that building very early and they're going to alert people, spend the money, pay for some monitoring, put some cameras in if you feel like you need to protect your property. So invite your local fire department, inspect the high risk areas of your church building, and spend some money and install some of these things that can protect lives and property. And here's the last thing, it starts with the I, and that is develop an incident action plan. Incident action plan. I'm not gonna spend a whole lot of time on this, but I am amazed at the number of churches that don't have a plan for when severe weather rolls through and they have a building full of people and kids. When the fire alarm goes off in the building at a church, because accidental alarms go off all the time, right? And nobody knows where to go. A children's ministry team should know immediately where to take those kids and where to reunite them with their parents if the fire alarm goes off in that building. Sadly, most don't. Most don't know where they go. They just go, well, we'll just get them out and we'll figure it out. Well, let's say you get them out. How are you going to make sure that the right parents get the right kids? You're still responsible for those kids. And again, we get playing, well, we know whose moms or dad. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. Maybe there's a visitor there that day. So do you have a plan for severe weather? Do you have a plan for fire alarm? Do you have a plan for active shooter? Everybody wants to talk about active shooter. It's one of the least likely things to happen, but you have to be prepared for it. Do your classes, do your people know where they're going if something happens like that? So an incident action plan that you develop and you teach all of your ministry teams. This is where we go. If at our church, we developed an incident action plan for our Kid Point team. We know where kids go, and I know what to tell the parents before they're released out of that room. If the alarm goes off, I tell our parents, right now, our children's ministry team is safe evacuating your children. They will meet you on the soccer field, and we ask that you line up. We will check the ID system, and we will release your kids properly. We know immediately. My children's ministry team, they know immediately we're going. We know where they're going if there's a tornado on the ground. We know what we're doing and what steps we're taking if they hear gunshots in the hallway. And we're trying to train all of our people to know what that is. And you just have to be prepared for those things. I know that doesn't deal directly with fire, but having an incident plan, thinking through these things before they happen will protect property and they will protect lives. So take some time to put together a plan and make sure that all of your people are prepared. And I mentioned before, the most likely incident to happen on your property is a medical incident. We have called the ambulance multiple times to Life Point on Sunday morning. Do you know where you're going to bring the stretcher? Do you know who? Having that stuff in place, I'm telling you, it's so simple, but making sure everybody's on the same page is a smart thing to do. So that's sort of me. That's sort of what I wanted to share with you is the idea that you need to reach out and invite your local fire department in, take some time and inspect those spaces that need to be inspected, spend some money, install the systems you need to install, and then put together a plan of action that if something happens while you are entrusted with those people, they are trusting you by coming in your facility. Do you have a plan to protect them, or are you just trusting it will be fine? It's always been fine. It'll always be fine. We'll just figure it out when it comes. That is not an acceptable answer as leaders. So I encourage you to take some time and do that. I can talk, but I'd love to hear some of your questions or hear from Tim what some of your questions are and take the opportunity to try to answer some of those. So
yep.
Tim,
so far, we don't have any questions. So right now, I want to repeat, if you got any questions about the things that Phil has been presenting to us tonight, now's the time to chime in. He got through that material very quickly. And so we've got some time to be able to answer questions. Someone raised their hand.
I want to make sure we left time for questions.
Q&A button there. I would ask a little bit about the Knox box. That's the first time I've heard about the Knox box. And would just ask what kind of vendor or company will come and install those for you. Is that something the fire department does, or? Is it a
No, typically a fire department's not going to install it. If you go to Knoxbox, in fact, this is going to be on the printout that you're going to receive in the next 24 hours is actually the website you go to. You go to knoxbox.com, it's going to ask for your zip code or the locality that you live in because they're going to need to know that. So before, you just can't go to Amazon and buy a Knoxbox. You need to purchase it from a certified vendor because they're going to need to know the code, your zip code, or chances are your local fire department has a code. And they're going to need to know that. And then you're going to buy it from a vendor and it's going to be made with that code or that sequence for the key to work. And then they'll be sent to you. And then you're going to have to find someone to install it, probably like a Class A contractor that will come out. If you've got masonry in front, they're probably going to have to remove a brick or two and sort of use concrete to set it back in there. People worry about Knox boxes. They're like, oh no, well, what if somebody comes and breaks into it and gets keys to our building? It's going to be, if they really want to get in your building, trust me when I tell you, it's going to be a whole lot easier for them just to break a window out than try to rip a Knox box open off the front of your building. I personally have never heard of or seen a Knox box that has been broken into or ripped off a building or tampered with to get keys out. It just doesn't happen, or at least to my knowledge.
Yeah. Well, I don't think most people even know the keys are in there until they watch your webinar.
One of the things I would encourage you to do is and now that you know about it, when you go to some bigger buildings, whether it be some bigger government buildings, your kids' schools, or like even a business, look at the front of the building on the front of it. And my guess is if it's a larger building, you're going to find a Knox box somewhere because they're very common in larger commercial buildings.
Yeah. I know we didn't ask you this, but you've been around a long time. I don't know how many of the fires you've responded to that are at churches. Of course, a lot of these things are not necessarily specifically fire related, but just curious in your own experience, what have been the even small fires or large fires and the causes that could have been prevented in the 20 years you've been going for church fires?
Oh man. Lightning. That's one that, because again, steeples and things of that nature, several, I don't know exactly how many, but quite a few that I've gone to that were lightning strikes on the building. Because again, churches tend to be taller, things like that. Electrical, mechanical issues. I'll tell you an example of something in a place that we have rented before at Waypoint. There were these transformers that were on stage that ran lighting and things like that in the main auditorium area. And we came in one day and they had cardboard boxes folded up and they were all leaning on the transformer boxes. Well, that's really dangerous because those things get hot and that could potentially start a fire. That would be another, some of the calls that we've run on, whether it be like in schools or a church building where stuff was just improperly stored. One of the things I should have mentioned under inspect is in storage spaces, sometimes churches will have chemicals. Maybe you have a baptistry and you have chlorine stored somewhere and perhaps large amounts of chlorine. That needs to be in a secure storage. You can't just stick that under somewhere. It actually gets into fire code of where those caustic materials and solutions, and if you've got batteries, big batteries that run things, or cleaning solutions, things of that nature, needs to be put in a safe place. So I've seen fires because people have stored flammable liquids in maintenance rooms, rooms that get very, very hot, furnace rooms, and there's lacquer, or there's mineral spirits, or there's something like that in those spaces, and the fumes ignited because somebody just got finished cleaning, I don't know, wood, and so they were in there with some English oil doing that, cleaning pews or whatever, and then the fumes ignited. So yeah, you just got to be careful and try to be smart.
All right. Well, I want to tell our viewers tonight, number one, thanks again, Phil, for sharing this with us. And to remind our viewers, you're going to get an email tomorrow with a PDF to the outline that he went through, as well as the slides. And I want to thank our ministry partner, Waypoint, Mid-Atlantic Christian University, for this. I want to tell you about a few things that are Waypoint related. One of them that was not in our slides, I'll get to those in a second, but Waypoint provides a number of services to churches that are practically free. And one of those that we do is what we call a strategic facility evaluation. And it's not professional evaluation like Phil's talking about from a fire perspective, but we go in and talk about, and we'll produce a 15, 20-page report for you about how you can best use your most expensive ministry tool, your facility. Well, one of the pages in there that we discover in every single church is we look in the kitchen for knives and chemicals. And I have yet to do a strategic facility evaluation where there aren't unsecured knives and chemicals in the kitchen. And there are kids running around, 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds, before church, after church, Wednesday night, whenever it is, that they're not, and they're under the sink, and there's the chemicals. And so that's something that we'll highlight, even though the purpose of our evaluation is how you can best use your facility. But we'll also point out a few things that, hey, have you thought about this storage room being a little bit more secure? So we'd love for you to contact us about a strategic facility evaluation that we could do for your church and how you can best use each room and your lobby and your offices and so on. But let me share these last couple slides with you. Let me get back to this here. And let me tell you about a couple things that are Waypoint related. Let me tell you about the next 3 webinars that are coming up this summer. And you may not be interested in these. We hope that you are, but there will be links to them in the email tomorrow. And we would like you to forward the link to the people in your church that would be most interested in these particular webinars. We try to do a webinar to a different target each month. And so, for example, next month is about pastoral care and how the nature of pastoral care has changed over the last generation or two. When I was a kid, the preacher could come and show up at your house unannounced to see how you were doing. And now that's not the way our culture works. And so there's going to be a few ministers talking about, so what's that look like in 2019 versus 1969? And so Neil Wheeler, who's on Waypoint staff, the director of leader care, is going to be leading that webinar. So it should be really good. The following month, in July, we'll be talking about your membership classes. And so if you got a team of people that deal with assimilation and assimilating people from guests in the membership, one of the things is your next steps program, whether it's a membership class or how do you get people to make a commitment to be a member of your church. And so we've got a whole panel of 4 ministers in the region, one from North Carolina and Virginia and Maryland, that are going to be talking about what they do at their church, but really what they've tried and kind of by the process of elimination, what they've gone away from to what they've landed on now, to have a really strong membership class or next steps event. So that'll be in July. And then in August, will be for your first impressions team. So this is not for your people you're trying to get into memberships to membership, but the people that are coming for the very first time. How do you make a good impression on them before they show up? Typically, we think about first impressions from the moment they turn onto your property, but actually you make some very critical first impressions before they arrive on your property. And we're going to talk about that because it's something that most people don't think about. So we would love for you to attend one of those webinars or all of them, but also to strategically invite the people in your church that need to hear them. The biggest thing that's coming up for Waypoint here this fall is we have the guys from E2 Effective Elders coming to our region again. We had them 3 years ago. We have to book them 3 years in advance, so we booked them again at that time. And so we have 2 one-day seminars on site, one in Kernersville, North Carolina, and one in Richmond in October, for elders and staff to come talk about eldership, and it's called What's Next. It's about how do elders think ahead in their elders meeting rather than deal with the now. How do they deal with the next at the church, and how that drives the church ahead so much better. And so it's going to be a great day. Last time when we did this 3 years ago, we had, I think, 280 elders and staff come to one of the 2 days. And so there'll be a link to that on your website as well. And you can watch other promotional materials that'll be coming out. But it's a great road trip for your elders to go on, which for me, when I brought my elders, that was the best thing, is just the road trip there and back was a great day in and of itself. But then the material is the best that's out there. So we would invite you to come to our elders event with the E2 Elder guys in October. So I think that's about it. We do have a little bit of time. And so this will be the last thing. Waypoint is hosting the International Conference on Missions in 2021. And we are inviting all churches in our region to participate in a special campaign called 21 in 21, where we're going to be planting 21 churches together around the globe as a result of us hosting the International Conference on Missions in November 2021 in Richmond. And so if your church hasn't heard about that, there's a link that's going to be in there where you can go to a little website. It's got a little video from me that's I think 7 minutes long that explains the campaign and how it works. But we're trying to raise $500,000 to plant 21 churches around the globe. We're already at about 330, and so we've got another $170,000 for churches to commit $3,000, $5,000, $10,000 to be given to this campaign in November of 2021. And so we would love for you to join that. Phil's church, LifePoint, was a big contributor last time in 2015. They're in again along with dozens of other churches. And so if your church would want to be a part of that, it's a great thing for your church to be a part of it and get excited about for that whole year. And it's a great thing for all of our churches to partner together to do something that we often don't have opportunities to do things together. And so it'll be pretty exciting to see 21 churches planted around the globe in 2021 as a result of ICOM coming to our region. Well, that is the end of our webinar, and we are early, which is about a first for us. And so we want to thank you for coming to this webinar. Thanks, Phil, for joining us tonight and giving us great material. And there will be a link in the email that comes tomorrow also with Phil's email. It automatically puts mine in, but then I'll put Phil's in as well. If you have questions for Phil about any of these individual items that you'd like to ask him about, his email address will be in the follow-up email you get tomorrow. So have a great evening, and we hope to see you at one of our next webinars coming up very soon. Thanks, Phil, and thanks to the rest of you.